All right, so that sheet I just passed out is your submission form. When you turn in an assignment, that's what I'm going to be looking at for what the assignment is and so on. So at the very top of it where it says project name, write the project name up there, which is weapon. The due date for this will be September 10th. So that's a Monday. We are not here this coming Monday. We will be here that Wednesday of next week, and then the next Monday that will be due. We will be starting the next assignment on that Monday. So don't expect to be able to come in and just work the entire time on this project, okay? The description for this is to understand the basics, the basics of Maya, modeling, texturing, and rendering. Okay, so after I'm done with this, I'm going to go over the texturing part of it. So that will include UV layout and actually how to texture stuff. For the learning objectives, obviously basic 3D modeling of a weapon. Keep your weapons simple. Don't try to get them too complex that you are like stuck on, certain spots. Simple UV layout of your object. The more complex your shapes are, the more complex your UVs are going to be. So if step 1 takes you 10 hours, step 2 will take you 10 hours also figure, right? So keep your stuff simple. Simple textures and substance. Rendering a turntable in Maya. So our weapons eventually will come back into Maya. We'll put the textures back on them and do a little turntable 360 animation. Typically when you're working with models, you look at them online in demo reels, you'll see turntable animations. And then composite it in Nuke. So the first few weeks, I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, because it's not just the Maya stuff. Now we're kind of kicking into, really customizing what our stuff looks like. So being able to go into Substance, Maya, and Nuke are 3 things that, will be keys to that. All right. There's no planning turn-ins for this one. As we get further into the class, there will be planning turn-ins. So one of our projects will be an environment. So all of your resources that you've collected will be turned in ahead of time and approved, but you'll turn those in again before you, when you turn in your actual assignment, okay? For the actual turn-in, where's my brush? Oh. That's what I want. You'll turn in your project folder, and it will have only the essentials, which is your movie, textures, and scene from Maya. All right, your movie should be 5-second turntable animation at 30 frames per second. And then for our resolution, this should be 960 by 540. Any animations we do for this class, that's going to be the resolution. And make sure you put your name on it. The class number and name you can just put 2520 Advanced 3D Modeling or 3D Modeling and Rendering. And then for points possible on this one, it will be 5 points. Okay, so the way this is going to work is on the 10th, you're turning in your stuff. You're going to have your Maya project folder all cleaned out. So when you render your images, you'll have all your animation images. I don't need those, so we just toss those out. You'll have a movie, you'll have your Maya scene, you'll have textures. That folder you turn into me. The slip that you see here, you turn into me. I open up your movie, I open your Maya file, I look through stuff, make sure things are organized, make sure your geometry is nice. Look at your movie, make sure that that looks nice as well. And then I give you points down here. If you receive 5 points, I write 5 points there. If you receive 4 points or 2 points or whatever it is, typically I'll go up here and say modeling needs work, or UVs are a mess, or texturing is too dark, or whatever, okay? And I hand them back. Regardless of how many points you got, you always get this back. If you're going to resubmit it, you check this box, you fix up all the stuff, and then you resubmit it. If you're not resubmitting it and you're cool with whatever grade you got, then you just sign this and turn it back into me. And then I take that paper and put it into Canvas, okay? So I give you the paper, you have the paper now, you turn it in, I will return it. When you sign it and give it back to me, that's your grade. So it just goes into Canvas, okay? Every assignment will have one of these attached to it. It makes it easier for you to see what needs fixing. It makes it easier for you to see what grades you have. And it makes it easier for me to go through and punch grades in. Questions on this? No? Okay. Don't lose your sheet. Make sure your name's on it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the process of taking one of my weapons, laying out the UVs, and then bringing it into Substance, and then bringing it back into Maya. Substance Painter, this one is free. You can download it for 18 months, I think it is, or maybe it's a year. You bring your model into Substance, it makes textures, and then you send them back out, okay? That's all it's for. You could do rendering inside of Substance, and it is like that uses a rendering engine called iRay, which is pretty sweet. I'll show that as well. The purpose of it is to build textures, to build materials for things. Substance comes with a bunch of materials. You can go to Substance Share, and these are a bunch of other materials and brushes and whatever else that you could download and use in Substance too. So just because I'm going to show certain ones doesn't mean you can't go out there and get other ones, okay? The reason that we're using Substance is because it creates what are called smart materials. It actually reads the kind of surface that you're using and will create textures based on that. So wherever there's a groove, maybe it should be darker or grungier there, it will add more grunge in those dark areas, and you can customize it for whatever you want. Let me set my project to weapon, open my weapon. All right, so let me start with simple things first. Okay, so ignore all the stuff I have there. I'm just going to create a cube. If we want our textures to look good inside Substance, we have to first lay out the UVs. Laying out the UVs mean we're taking our 3D object and converting it into a flat object that the textures can lay nicely on. If they're not laid out at all, it'll be a mess and it won't work, and there's no point in even going into Substance. If they're laid out crappily, same reason, okay? So we want our UVs to be good so that our textures will be good. It's all based on one and the other. So what do my UVs look like right now? So if I go to the UV menu and I say Assign Checker Shader, This will let me know exactly what this looks like. Now I may have to hit 6 on my keyboard in order for that to happen. Oh, sorry, nope, that's a different thing. I'm not going to assign it. They changed how they did it. I'm going to go to the UV editor, so UV editor. And then under textures, there it is, I'm going to go to checker map. There we go. So now I see this is my checkerboard, and then this is my cube. Now no object is going to be perfect anytime you want it. Okay, the cube is the only exception. When you make a cube in Maya, the UVs are pretty much like they're already laid out. Okay, so if you model just a cube, you could take it in. You do anything to the cube, it doesn't work. So if I were to go and grab one of the vertices and just move it really far down like this, okay, that didn't change too much for the texture itself. It looks pretty close. But let's say that I then took this one and I really stretched it out. Okay, so you can see how the UVs on this now look like junk and the UVs over here look fine. It's all based on their original shape. As I start stretching that 3D point, the 2D version is still in the same spot, so it doesn't move, so it's basically stretching the picture out right here. So what we would need to do is we need to lay out the UVs so that this shape is better represented inside here, the UV editor, okay? So I'm going to delete the cube, two of them for some reason, and make a cylinder. Okay, now here's a cylinder by default, and you'll see that this one, the top is fine, the bottom is fine, but then this middle area, it's like stretched out. Okay, the cylinder doesn't come in with good UVs right away. It's just how it comes in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the UVs on this. If you consider every surface a cylinder, the process is a lot easier. Okay, even your finger, if you were to unwrap a hand, this is basically a cylinder here with a cap, okay? Every finger is a cylinder with a cap. My arm is a cylinder with a cap right here and right there, okay? So if you consider that, it makes the whole process a lot easier. So the first thing that I do anytime I lay out UVs, don't overthink it. There's a 1, 2, 3, 4 step process, so just make sure you do the 1, 2, 3, 4 step process. The first step is to freeze your transforms. So we have a hotkey in the shelf. So I'm going to say modify freeze transforms. Okay, click the button, it works. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the UVs somehow. Okay, the easiest way to kind of start doing this is going to UV and picking the shape that most resembles it. So what shape out of these three does this most resemble? Cylindrical, planar, or spherical? Cylindrical, right. So if I click that, you'll see that it creates, and I'll move this off to the side so you can see it. It creates this like half cylinder shape, okay? And what it's doing is it's taking that checkerboard and like projecting it or wrapping it around the sides of that cylinder. I don't care what it does to the top and bottom. If I had something like this, if I took this projector and I shined an image right here, the image isn't going to reach this part or that part, right? That makes sense? That's what's happening to the top and bottom. The top and the bottom are looking like junk because it's just not projecting there. So I'm going to go to face, grab the top face and the bottom face, and then which one of these do you think it would be? Cylindrical, planar, or spherical? Planar. So I'm going to go to the option box, and I just changed this to best plane. Okay, and that basically just, if I left it at the default, if the face is facing up, it might shoot it this way, or it might shoot it that way. I want to just tell it. So you pick whatever the best direction for you to project that, that's what you do. Okay. So now I have the top of this is projected one way, the bottom is projected, and the cylinder itself is projected. So now I'm going to come over here, I'm going to turn off this image. Make this bigger. And then I'm going to right click, go to UV shell, grab all my stuff, use that shift right click. It works like all over the place, okay? And then this will always be the same steps. Unfold, unfold option box. And then anytime you see a map size or a pixel size or a tile size, you want to pick the biggest one, okay? So I say 4096, apply. Now what that does is it automatically unfolds it. Like let's say that for whatever reason my cylinder, instead of it being fully unfolded, let's say it was like half unfolded, okay? It recognizes that it's half unfolded and unfolds it the rest of the way. That's what that tool does. You'll notice that it put it on a bit of an angle. So I'm going to shift right click and I'm going to say orient shells. That just straightens it out. And then I'm going to shift right click and go to layout UV option box. Okay, now in this one there's a resolution. Crank it up. There's a pre-shell scaling. I'm going to say preserve 3D ratios. There's a texture map size. I'm going to say 4096. And then this will be 5 and 5. Okay? So this menu needs to be set every time. 4096, preserve 3D ratios, 4096, 5 and 5. Every time, those are the settings. You don't need to worry about changing anything in here. That works perfect. So now I hit layout. And what it's going to do is it's going to take the pieces of this and try to fit them inside this square. That's what it's going to do. There it goes. So this square right here where the black line is, the black line is, the blue line and the blue line are. That square is my texture. Anything outside of that is other stuff we'll get to at some point. For right now, we're focused on just this square, okay? So we want to fill that square as much as we can with our pieces. If you look now, you'll see that I have consistent squares here and there. Okay? There are 3 things that we need to have for all of our UVs. Number 1, we need bigger text. There you go. Squares everywhere. That rhymes, right? Number 2 is everything should be the same size. And number 3, everything fits in the box. Oh, so close. Dropping the font. And number 4, just for an extra one, as few pieces as possible. Okay? So these 4 things, every single time we lay out the UVs, have to be there. If they're not there, Substance will not work the way we want it to. It will not give us a nice detailed texture. If it's not squares, the texture will be stretched, okay? So if we have we draw a perfect circle on there, it'll be an oval, or it'll be a random shape. If they're not the same size, that means that one area will have nice resolution, the other area might be stretched out or like pixelated, okay? If everything doesn't fit in the box, Substance just won't work. And if we have a lot of pieces, it can be very difficult to make things look good. That bottom one, sometimes it's hard to get as few pieces as possible. Sometimes you just have a very, very complex surface that just gives you lots of pieces. Crazy UV map. There you go. So as few pieces as possible, but that might be as few pieces as they could have gotten there, okay? Back to Maya. Okay, so number 1, do we have squares all over it? All right, are they both the same size? Yes. Few pieces as possible? Yep. And then everything fits in the box? Yep. Okay. So we've hit on all the points. So this is something that we could just take into Substance and use, and it'll work fine, okay? I do want to do one more thing before I go in there. This box is my texture. So I want to get these pieces also as big as I can while maintaining as few pieces as possible. So I'm actually going to give, well, maximizing or optimizing space. Okay, so imagine you go into Photoshop and you make a huge document, 10,000 by 10,000, but you only draw in the bottom left corner of it. The rest of it is a waste. Okay, so that's what we want to do. That square here, Substance is only going to draw where those pieces are. So the rest of it is basically a waste. Now if I were to have two cylinders, I could put one cylinder on the bottom, one cylinder on the top, and that would be fine. It would maximize my space pretty good. If I had a bunch of stuff like a gun or a building or a computer or whatever, I could load a bunch of stuff right into that square, and that would make things easier. Fitting a bunch of stuff here. With this one shape, what I can do is I'm going to cut it and then just rearrange the pieces, okay? So if I go to Edge and I find about the middle, that looks like it's about the middle, I shift right click and I say cut. Now I'm going to go back to my UV shell, I'm going to go back to grabbing it, and back to layout. All my settings should still be the same. Boom, okay? So now we filled more space inside this area. So more space, these squares are smaller now, meaning I'll be able to fit more texture in there. Very rarely will you ever be able to fill this entire thing perfectly like you just saw in that one thing, okay? That's good enough. All right, so that's the gist of what we want to do. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to apply it to all this other stuff, okay? So I'm going to isolate one object at a time and just focus on one object. So I just click that little isolate, and that makes life easier. So if I look at this, let me turn my texture off. What shape does this look like? Sphere, right? But what shape should we assume it's like if we're going to UV map? A cylinder, right? So we're going to assume it's a cylinder because a cylinder lays out its UVs pretty easily. Now watch what happens when I hit 1. It goes back to this. That's fine. When you start your UV map, lay it out as low res as you can, and then Maya will take care of the rest later. Okay? So I'm going to grab all the faces here, and instead of grabbing just the top and the bottom after, I'm just grabbing the middle because I know that's where my cylinder part's going to be. So I'm grabbing that all the way around, and I cylinder map it. That's all I have to do. I'm going to grab this, 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 and this, and this, 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 and this, and then I will do a planar map. Okay, so now if I were to turn that texture back on, we would see the checkerboards here and there. Now, let's go through our list, right? So are they squares everywhere? Look right here, and then look right there. So no. So they're not squares everywhere, okay? Are they the same size? You can definitely tell right here and there they're not. Are they fitting inside the box? Nope. And are they as few pieces as possible while optimizing space? Yeah, but they're not really optimizing space because they're outside the box, okay? So let's grab all of the faces inside here, and we're going to unfold. Every time we go into this, we're going to unfold and then lay out. Unfold's only option, 4096, the only one we need to worry about. Check that real quick. Yeah, okay. All right, so that's that. And then we'll go to Layout, 4096, Preserve 3D Ratios, 4096, 5 and 5. If I use spherical, it's going to pinch it at the top. The only time I would use spherical is if I was insane. No, at one point spherical was something that people used. Now they just kind of kept it around. I've never used it. Maya 2015 or 16 was the last iteration of horrible UVs, and then 2017 and 18 actually fixed it, so that this is 10 times easier than it used to be. Okay, so let's look at our stuff now. Squares everywhere? Yes. Same size? Yep. Really, when you look at it, look at the pieces. These pieces and those pieces, typically that's where you'll see the biggest difference. Everything fits inside the box. And then as few pieces as possible. Yep. I really didn't optimize the space though, so I'm going to optimize my space. So I'm going to go to Edges. I'm going to Cut. And then this one's like rotated, so I'm just going to orient it so that it's not rotated as much. You can also manually grab them and rotate. There we go. And then I'm going to go to Layout again. Okay, you only do the unfold once, okay? Unless you start pushing and pulling vertices or UVs, you don't need to do it more than that. All right, so now that is a much better optimizer. It fits much nicer. Now, if I were to take this into Substance, that would be my UVs. If I hit 3, it would actually stretch out the textures, so I can't have, I can't do like 1 or 3 in here. I actually have to smooth it out and then unfold it again, okay? So that's usually another area that people forget to do. So I'm going to go to Mesh, Smooth. Maybe I'll do 2 subdivisions. There we go. And then I just have to go back in here, unfold it again, and then lay it out again. There we go. So now we still have the same settings, and now this will go into Substance very nicely and be able to work good. Cool. All right, let's go to another piece. All right, so this one started off as a cube, I can see right there. Remember I said cubes start off with nice UVs until we start squishing and squashing and stretching it. Well, that's what happened there, okay? So we'll do the same thing we did. It may be easier to find one that's kind of, in the same direction as the rest of it, not one that's kind of off on some weird angle. So like that one is a pretty good one to use, all right? So I'm going to UV cylindrical map this. Now the cylindrical map actually came in like sideways, okay? It doesn't, when you project a cylinder with something like this, it doesn't automatically fit it. It just always projects that direction. That's something that they haven't fixed. So if I go into the channel box and I rotate it, maybe in X, yep, that was it. It'll rotate perfectly, okay? Then I'm going to grab the cap, and then I'll do a planar. And then now I will do a layout. So unfold it first, then lay it out. There we go. So now let's check it out and see if it worked. So, do we have squares everywhere? They don't. No. We have squares here, but not there. Okay? So, what was the first thing I had us do when we did the square one, the cube one? There was something we clicked in our shelf, if you remember it. Freeze transformations. Yep. Okay. So whenever you take a shape and you distort it from its original shape, and I'm not talking about universally scaling, that's not distorting. When you grab it in one direction and scale it out, the UV thing doesn't work right. Okay? So that's what's happening here. So all I have to do is freeze the transforms, and if you look at my scales, you can see they're not all the same. Once I freeze my transforms, and then I unfold this again, this looks completely different. And now I have squares. Okay, so when you get to that point where it's like, why isn't this working? That's why it's not working. All right, so we have squares. I think this is pretty much as optimized as we're going to get, especially since this piece here, all of this would actually be in one square. So I wouldn't have like a square for each one of these pieces. This entire weapon would be all inside one piece, inside one square, okay? So I don't need to cut this any further. I think that's going to be fine. All right, so now this shape is the same as that shape, right? Yeah. I don't want to have to lay out the UVs again on that one. It's the same shape, why bother? I could do two things. One of them is I could delete all those other shapes, duplicate the shapes, and just put them back in those positions. That wouldn't take terribly too long. The easiest way to do it is to grab the one I'm going to copy from, shift-click the one I'm going to copy to, and then under Mesh, I'm going to say Transfer Attributes. And you would think that's UV. It's not UV, it's Component. Okay? But what this will do is it'll copy the UVs from one to the other. Okay, so now this one has nice UVs. And if I take this one and then that one, and I do the same thing, now that one has nice UVs. Now ignore the cap here, because remember, this is the smoothed out version. That's the actual version. And wouldn't it be great if you could do them all at the same time? You can't. You can't do them all at the same time. It does suck. I wrote a script for it last year, but for this one, I'm not going to use that. All right, so now all of these should be good, and I can just hit one and kind of spin around and make sure. Yep. All right, I'm also going to freeze my transforms on all those. Okay, so the head of this is done. Now I'm going to go to the pole, and just to keep it simple, I'm going to just isolate it. So I should have the cylinder part here, and then the rock part or the solid part right there. So what shape am I going to use first? Cylinder. Should I do anything else before I do this? Yep, freeze my transforms. You can definitely see over here, 15.96 is my scale. That's going to cause some stuff. It's not detrimental. Like I said, this is 100 times quicker than it was. Whoops, wrong button. Cylinder. Okay, so now it's not going the right direction, so how do I get it the right direction? Rotate it. There we go. So that's good. I'm ignoring the fact that it looks weird, because I know that as long as it's projected correct, it'll be fine. I'm going to grab that. And what am I going to do for this one? Planar. And that's done. So now we'll go back to the UVs. Oops, it's already up. I'll grab this. I will unfold it. I'll lay it out. And we have squares everywhere. They're all the same size. They fit inside that area. Good to go. The other end is open, correct. Nope. It actually makes it easier because then we don't have to worry about those faces. All right, so now we got the grip. All right, so what shape should I use for this? Cylinder, right. Same exact thing. Freeze my transforms first because I got some scales on here. Cylinder. I need to rotate it. All right, that should be good. And now let's see what this is going to look like. So, oops, unfold, layout. And if you look at this, there's like a whole bunch of pieces on this one. Now I'm fine leaving it with a whole bunch of pieces, but let's pretend that I didn't want it, just so we can see what we would do if we cut something apart and now they're separated. Let's say we want to put stuff back together, okay? I'm going to go to edge, and as I move my mouse around, see how I get to this edge here, and it highlights that edge on the other side. Those two edges are the same edge, okay? It's just where we cut it, that was your shared edge. So if I click on that edge, and I'm going to have to get actually a bit closer too, because there's a tiny edge right there and a tiny edge right there. Then I shift right click and I just say move and sew. So if I want to cut something, I grab an edge and cut it. If I want to move it and sew it, I move it and sew it. And it just puts it right back attached to that. So the same thing here. I can grab that, and then this, and then that, and then move and sew that one. Okay, now like I said, I don't need to do all this, and I probably shouldn't because it's going to get really long. So I think that piece is probably good. This piece I could probably join. If something is not touching an edge, so up here, this edge isn't connected. That's just an open edge. So I could actually do this where I marquee it, because no other edge except for the one it's connected to is going to join. If I just did this, it would join everything together. Okay, and we don't want that for this piece. And I think this one down here, I can merge that. Maybe I will merge this. And then I'll cut it right there. There we go. So unfold it again, lay it out again. Dun, dun, dun. There we go. Okay, all the same size, fit inside the box. Squares everywhere, optimized, yeah, perfect. All right, and then the last piece will be just this little strap here. Okay, now this strap is already one piece. Okay, how we built it, we started off with a cube, and I extruded it inward, and that gave us a strap. So everything is all just still one piece. If I don't want to use any of these things, cylindrical, planar, or spherical, whatever, the biggest thing with UVs is separating it wherever there's a seam. Imagine I have a 20-ounce bottle or something and the label's wrapped around here. If I were just to cut anywhere on there, I should be able to flatten out that label and make it perfect, right? The same thing happens here. If I just cut this around, it should be able to lay flat anywhere. Okay, I may have to cut it both directions, but it should work. So I'm going to freeze transform first. I'm going to go to edge here and just double click. So I grab the edge going around here. I'm going to shift double click this one, and then I'm going to cut. And now I'm going to grab everything. I'm going to go to unfold, and then I'm going to go to layout. And it's thinking. There we go. So now if I hit 6, that did not work out like I thought it would. Oh, there we go. I didn't hit 1. All right, so it looks like it worked except for this face. This face right here, and probably, nope, the other side's fine. This face right here didn't seem to want to work. So I'm going to go there and just project it with planar. There it is. I'm going to cut it somewhere right there. And now I should be able to unfold it and lay it out. Okay, or I could have just done a cylindrical map and then did the same way I did the other one. Okay. There we go. All right, so that looks good. We're good enough. Whoops. Forgot one piece. I just have that little cap right there. And this one should be, I think it's just a torus, yeah. So I should be able to take the torus and just cut right, nope, that's already cut. So I may be able to just grab this and just unfold it. Yep, there we go. So it's just unfolded, and now I can lay it out. Thinking a little bit too hard. There we go. All right, so that one's good. Cool. All right, so now let me take all the pieces for this. I'm going to isolate them just so we can see them, okay? So all of these pieces are ones that I used to actually create, or I did lay the UVs out for stuff I want to bring into Substance. I hit 1 on all of them so I can see what they look like in rough mode. This is the only one I smoothed, okay? So if I go to the UVs, that's exactly what I want that to look like. All these other pieces, though, still need to be smoothed, and they're not. They're all just still rough. So I'm going to go to Mesh Smooth on these. And I think this one just needs to be scaled up a little bit. There we go. That's good there. Okay, so that's what it would look like. I think this could probably use another level of smoothing. That's good. And that could also. Okay, so let me grab all of those. There we go. Okay, so now that I have all my pieces here, I'm going to delete my history. I'm going to save this. All the pieces are on top of each other. If I brought this into Substance just like it is, it would actually paint textures on top of textures on top of textures, and it just wouldn't work, okay? So once I have all of my stuff laid out individually, then I can go in here and say unfold all the stuff together. It goes through and unfolds everything. And then I go back and lay it out. And then so now what it's going to do is take all the pieces that we have separated and lay them all out in that grid, okay, like that. And so we should see from one piece to the other consistent squares, all the same size, and that looks pretty perfect. Okay, so you may have some smaller ones, you may have bigger ones. If I got to the point where I came in and all of them were like super tiny like this, but there was like one huge piece, I would want to cut that huge piece so that it could fit the entire thing better, okay? But we didn't get that, so we're good. All right, I'm going to do one more thing before I go into Substance. Oops, the wrong thing. I'm going to say edit mesh. No, mesh tools. This way. So every different material that I'm going to have inside Substance, I'm going to give a different color. Now some of these I may not, some of these I may use the same one, but I'm going to apply color to each one of these so that in Substance I have the ability to actually select this item will get this material, this item will get that material. There we go. So now let me take all of this. I'm going to, wait a minute, I didn't want that. Thought I put the spikes as a different color. So now I'm going to export this out. So I'm not going to go through the whole substance part, but I will show you how we would take it out. So I go to Export Selection. I'm going to export it as an OBJ. If OBJ isn't an option, under Window Settings Preferences Plugin Manager, OBJ Export is an option you would load. Usually it's loaded. If it's not, you would click that. Substance gives me a warning, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to hit continue. All right. So I just wanted you to see what Substance can do, and that way you'll get an idea of where we're going with this. So I'm going to make a new document. I'm going to select my file. Here. There's my weapon. And this is going to be PBR metallic roughness. I don't need that other one. There we go. Create texture per UDIM. That's fine. Import cameras. I really don't need the camera. I'll set this at 1024 for today. There we go. All right. So there's my weapon, and the controls in here are the same as Maya, so it's easier to move around. So consider this like a Photoshop where you can actually just like paint right on your surface. Okay. So if we wanted obviously that white, we just paint on there. Here's layers. So you can add new layers. You can add groups. You can add layer masks. Lots of stuff you can do. This is where the power of Substance comes in, though, is I'm going to go to my texture set settings. I'm going to bake my maps. Yes, everything's set there. Vertex color is under ID. I'm going to say use low poly as high poly and bake. So what this is going to do is this part is actually the part that goes through and reads what the surface looks like. Where our points touching, you'll see a huge difference once it's done. Not a huge difference, a subtle difference apparently. You'll see a difference at least when it's done where we can see a little bit more detail in here. If I cycle through this and I hit B, I'm seeing all the maps that it generated. So here is, that's the ID map. Apparently my ID map did not come in right. Next color. I didn't export my ID map right. I'll have to fix that. But I can hit B, and what this is doing is it's showing me the ambient occlusion. It's showing me the curvature of the surface. It's showing me the position, the thickness. So it's basically like looking at the thickness of each shape. The normal, which is the bump, and then the ID. Okay. Oops. So now if I go down here to my smart materials, and let's say I find this worn copper, and I drag it, my layers, I drag it onto my layer. I turn off layer 1. Now the entire thing is being treated as worn copper. And if you look here, you can see like there's actually like scratch and scuff marks on it. And if I open this up, I have all these different properties that I can play with. This layout is not set up nice. This is the new version of this. I don't know why they put things where they put them. Maybe that can go there. That's my brush. No, just pull this off. Well, that's painting. One of my menus is missing. I don't know what happened to it. But anyway, you can adjust what that looks like based on those settings. Maybe it's over here. Nope. Nope. I never had to turn it on. It's just always been there. All right, whatever. All right. So I could also take this. Let's say I delete copper worn, and then I could drop on machinery. And you can see that wherever the surfaces are kind of like touching, that's where we're getting a lot of this like noise stuff happening here. Because it's actually reading like where are these areas that would typically have this kind of rust on it. And I could turn that off, I could turn it on. I have it in the background. Reset UI. There we go. So you can see how I can very easily go through and kind of tweak what this is looking like based on that. Now, like I said, you can also do layer masks. So I can take this layer group, add a layer mask to it, and then I can select, I moved everything over. That's the one. That's white, yes. I can select different pieces and have like that material on this one. And then I can drop a different material up here, throw a layer mask on it, and then select the polygons I want for that one. Oops, I didn't want that. This is why that color map is nice, because the color map allows me literally just to click and then it fills it. There we go. And then I can drop another one here, still painted. Then here's leather is on here somewhere, leather. There we go. So very quickly I've been able to add these textures to it. Now the textures aren't just coloring, it's actually like bump and depth and all this other stuff. If I go into the renderer here, so this is iRay. This is where you can make things look a lot more realistic, like render it like right inside there. It's only good for stills. It does have some camera stuff, but you just kind of leave it the way it is. And post effects. That's the post effects. I don't want that one. Where's my other one? There. So I can adjust the focal length. Oops. It's right there. So just inside here, there's some pretty neat tools. And if I get close enough, and then I fix that anti-alias or that depth of field, wrong one. You can really see the detail just kind of like come out on there. So this wouldn't look as good if I were to have brought my original one in that had no UVs on it and it was just a mess. I think this one is a mess here, yes. And just for fun, I'll just make it even more of a mess. There we go. So here's this axe head, just so you can see what it's going to do. I'll throw that machinery one on it, and it just does that. Like, there's no detail to it, it's just flat. Even if I bake my maps here, it's not going to improve it because the UVs are so messed up, it doesn't know where to put any of the texture. Because even though we're working in 3D, it's writing out 2D information. Yeah, look at that. And you can see the bump on there too is, you know, it's pretty deep. Something else I was going to say or show. No. I can't remember. Okay, so once you get your weapon modeled, the next step will be to save it off and then start working on the UVs. It might take you some time just to get used to it, but it is pretty easy once you break it down to those essential things. That's all we're trying to get. And when I do this, I freeze my transforms, project maps, unfold. Okay, so those are typically the things that I'm going to do every time I lay out my UVs, are those steps. It's a bit simplified, but that's the idea. Okay, if it helps, do a couple different objects before you get into yours. Do a cylinder, do a square or a cube, do a sphere, try things out. Even a sphere, I wouldn't use spherical. I would use cylinder for the center and then planar for the top and the bottom. It gives you some much nicer geometry. All right, any questions on that yet?